How you all doing, everybody? It's me, Crazyfrankie, and I'd like to welcome you to my Week 2 4 key game picks. Before we get into Week number 2, let me get into some thoughts from Week number 1. Now, as I said in the last video, when I mentioned this before, about anything that involves Week number 1, it is the hardest. It's really the hardest week to pick because everybody's just starting out. We don't know how each team is going to perform, what might be the most obvious things, and what might be a few surprises. And to be quite honest, this definitely was, Week 1 was definitely very unpredictable. I mean, if you look at here are probably a couple things that were pretty obvious. Number one, the Panthers were going to be terrible. They got blown out by the Saints. And probably the other predictable thing, I don't know if I want to say that this is predictable, but once again, the Cincinnati Bengals starting off slow again. But I don't know if I want to say that this was expected because they played the Patriots, and there's no more Bill Belichick. You have a rookie head coach, and obviously you go with Jacoby Brissett, and you beat the Bengals by 6 points. Sometimes I gotta wonder what's really going on with the Bengals. I gotta wonder what's going on with the Bengals. This is for now the 6th consecutive season that the Bengals have started out very poorly at the beginning of the season. I'm going to be quite honest with you. I think what's happened with the Bengals now, I think this is pretty damaging now because it's really hard for me to say that the Bengals are going to quickly turn it around, and it should be. They do, look, their schedule at the beginning of the season is pretty favorable. Well, actually, it's favorable right after the Chiefs because the Bengals got the Chiefs coming up, and that's obviously, that could be another loss coming right there for this Bengals team. You got to wonder, obviously Chase is still dealing with some contract negotiations, and they're dealing with some injuries too. But that's really inexcusable. You lose to a very, very terrible Patriots team, which, by the way, right now, with everybody, well, you would think that with them and the Jets, and the Pats, the Dolphins, and the Bills all winning, and the Jets losing to the 49ers, I mean, the Jets are really the ones that are in last place, and everybody else in the AFC East is in first place, in a first-place tie. That, to me, it's kind of astonishing. I mean, I don't know what to think of the Bengals right now. They were one of my sleeper picks. To me, I did pick them as a playoff team. But the way things are going right now, I might be totally wrong on that prediction. And speaking of teams that were in the playoffs and all that, going back to the Chiefs and Ravens game that happened on opening night, very, very, very just you couldn't get the game-tying touchdown by a toe, one of the receivers who caught the ball and ended up touching the line of the out-of-bounds area. You can't ask for a bitter ending on that one. And the game in Sao Paulo, I don't know if I've ever seen a worse field ever in an NFL game. Obviously, because that stadium that's in Sao Paulo is really more meant for soccer, so it's obvious you need to have kind of some different type of fielding as opposed to an NFL field. I thought the game was sort of a success. I mean, it is true that the popularity of the NFL in Brazil has grown, but it's hard. It's really hard when the NFL, when they travel and, they're trying to expand the game a little bit here, try to showcase the game in other countries and all that. Look, the reality is, no matter how much Goodell tries to go to many different countries with the league, look, soccer is still king in the entire world, and I acknowledge that. I mean, at times I've watched some soccer. I mean, I'm not going to say that I don't like the sport or anything. I mean, I do watch the World Cup, and I'm not going to lie about that. But really, it's hard to expand the NFL because really the only thing that really NFL really shines more than anywhere else is really Germany. Anyways, other than what else happened, and I don't want to get into or talk about the discussion, obviously, of what happened with Tyreek Hill and law enforcement in Miami. That's a whole nother subject. I mean, I don't want to get into it because it's a very difficult situation and what really happened. I really don't know. I'm not a lawyer or anything else for that matter, or a person who studies law, because that's really out of my jurisdiction and out of bounds. And I'm not going to really say all that, but obviously he got shooken up before the start of the Dolphins-Jaguars game. But in the end, he ended up playing a big role in beating the Jaguars and ended up winning. And obviously, I don't want to get into much more about, I talk about the Jets and all that. Their offensive line was horrible. They couldn't do a lot to give Rodgers time to throw the ball, but I didn't really think their defense really was a factor in losing to the 49ers. I thought their Jets defense is what I thought. They were going to be good, but San Francisco's offense really punked them big time. Anyways, I got to get into my week 2 picks, so sorry about that. I've been rambling on for the last 4 minutes, and I need to get into week 2. All right, everybody, let's begin with key game number 1, and it is the Thursday night game. It is the Bills versus the Dolphins. The Dolphins are a slight 2-point favorite in this one here. Josh Allen was 18 of 23, 232 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Tua went for 23 of 37, 338 yards, 1 touchdown, and no interceptions in a big victory over the Jaguars. Obviously, a very big key matchup to start week 2, and especially a divisional game for one of these teams that will be ahead in the division. The Bills really struggled a lot. Obviously, Josh Allen is working with different types of players. Obviously, with no Stephon Diggs. He basically, the Bills had to come from behind to beat the Cardinals, and the Cardinals kind of a surprise. The Cardinals are starting to look good, but that's another question that's going to be down the line. I don't know what will the Cardinals do but this is more about the Bills. Josh Allen basically now has to carry the team all by himself. Let's be real. The Bills' defense really isn't that great, and that's troublesome. If you're part of Bills Mafia, this is troubling. Because the way the Dolphins play, look, the Dolphins didn't start out well either against the Jaguars. They trailed for the majority of the game until a second half comeback, and they ended up winning on a game-winning field goal. So, to be honest with you, both teams are about evenly matched pretty much in terms of every category. But here's the thing. The Dolphins have a little bit more weaponry than the Bills have, and Josh Allen's going to have to figure out who his targets are going to be in terms of the passing game. Because obviously Josh Allen's doing everything himself, and that's really hurting the Bills a lot, even though he did help them win the game against the Cardinals. It's a tight ball game. Dolphins are only a 2-point favorite in this one here, and it wouldn't surprise me if this goes down to 1.5, maybe even 1 point. But in reality I'm picking the Dolphins here because you got the cheetah, Tyreek Hill, and you were able to get the running game. They have been able to establish much of a run, but obviously there is questions about their secondary and the defense, really. That's still an issue that the Dolphins are having. It's definitely going to be a back-and-forth game. This game, Thursday night, to start the Amazon's Thursday night games, I think this is a good start. It's for a divisional game here, it's obviously, I'm picking the Dolphins here because I think they have the better weapons in terms of their offense. Defense-wise, they're pretty even with the Bills. They're about average. But I just think the Dolphins' offense is much better than the Bills, and I think that Tua will be ready for the Bills this time. I'm picking the Dolphins here at -2, Dolphins over the Bills. All right, key game number 2. It is the Bears versus the Texans. Now, why am I talking about this game here? Obviously, this has blowout written all over it. Well, the Bears having to come from behind, and obviously that was Caleb Williams' first start in the league. They had to come from behind to beat the Titans. The Titans shot themselves in the foot in that game, and the Bears took advantage of it. Caleb Williams was 14 of 29, 93 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. C.J. Stroud, the Texans they barely beat the Colts. They only beat them by 2 points. Stroud was 24 of 32, 234 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions. A battle of number 1 draft picks here to come emerge here. The Texans are a 6.5-point favorite, and I would say that's about right because I think it's more on the lines. I'm giving you guys kind of an easy pick here, even though, why would I say this is a key game? Obviously, I consider it a key game mostly if you're a Bears fan and you're trying to make some noise in the NFC North and you're trying to keep pace with the Lions and the Vikings. I really don't know what's the status of the Packers and Jordan Love. That's a whole nother story. We don't know how long he's going to be out. But really for the Bears, this is kind of a must-win game for them. But it's a bad mismatch with this game right here. Houston has weapons loaded at wide receiver. This is where Stephon Diggs is in, and they're just much better. They're way better than the Bears. The Bears are still trying to establish themselves. But obviously their defense has to really going to have to come up with some big defensive plays in order to stop C.J. Stroud. This is an easy pick here. I'm going to pick the Texans here. They're just way better team than the Bears. Obviously, this is for basically TV marketing purposes because it is the Sunday night. It's really the Sunday night game, and obviously they're marketing the future right here between these quarterbacks here. But unfortunately for this match, this is really more of a mismatch here because the Bears are still have to prove themselves because they're to me, I said in the beginning of my videos when I was picking division winners, I don't know what we're going to get out of the Bears or Caleb Williams. I mean, they're basically a young team that's trying to find an identity. The Texans are a much better team. It's an easy pick. You got to go with the Texans here at -6.5 Texans over the Bears. Key game number 3, it is the Bengals versus the Chiefs. The Chiefs are a 5.5 point favorite, and I would say that is about right on the money for this odds here. Joe Burrow was only 21 of 29, 164 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, in a bad loss against the Pats. Patrick Mahomes, 20 of 28, 291 yards, 1 touchdown and 1 interception. So the defending champions really had to hang on for dear life. I mean, they didn't, I wouldn't say that they started out impressive in the first half against the Ravens, but in the second half, they fell flat. The Ravens almost came back and tied the football game. Obviously, that play in the end zone is basically haunting the Ravens right now. But in reality is, the Chiefs have the offense, but now there's some questions on their defense here. And they won the Super Bowl last year with defense more than they did the offense. But here's a problem. The way the Bengals played against the Pats, this is another name. This is kind of an easy pick right here because where do the Bengals stand at this point? That was an embarrassing loss they had to the Pats. Joe Burrow, I don't know if he's fully recovered from that wrist injury. You got to wonder what he's done in the offseason. I don't know how healthy he really is because wrist injuries, they take a while to heal, but I'm starting to wonder now if there's some permanent damage he suffered. I don't know. And then you got the situation with Jamar Chase and the contract negotiations, and they have some injuries. This is kind of an easy pick right here. Before all of this happened for the Bengals and all that, remember, Joe Burrow's had Patrick Mahomes' number. He's had his number. He's been the only quarterback that's actually beaten Mahomes. But in this kind of situation here, the Bengals are really struggling, and I don't know if I give them any sort of chance to beat the Chiefs in this game. I kind of don't because the way that the problems that Bengals are having right now, it's not helping. It's not helping the Bengals one bit. And I would say the Chiefs are going to run over the Bengals all over in this game. It wouldn't surprise me if this game ends in a blowout. But it's obvious you got to go with the Chiefs here at -5.5. The Bengals have got a lot of problems they got to fix. And who knows if they'll ever get fixed. And Burrow's he needs to start playing better football here. And that offensive line still not protecting him, and that is just awful. Chiefs over the Bengals. Chiefs at -5.5. And finally, key game number 4, a rematch of the NFC Divisional. That game was a classic between the Buccaneers and the Lions. The Lions are a slight touchdown favorite at -7. Expect that number to go much lower because the way the Buccaneers played last week against Washington, it was pretty impressive. They blew them out. Baker Mayfield was 24 of 30, 289 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. And the way that the Lions started out against the Rams, I mean, they struggled in the second half when they dominated the first half. Because Jared Goff was 18 of 28, 217 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. And keep in mind, the Lions had to go into overtime just to beat the Rams. So now you got to wonder here, in this point here, have the Lions maybe shook off a little bit of rust and hopefully they clean up? Because they got penalized a lot in that game against the Rams, despite them winning. And you got to wonder if Baker Mayfield is very hungry to get some revenge from that divisional game. This is actually a tough pick, despite the odds makers having the Lions as an early 7-point favorite. I really think it's going to be a much tighter ball game than that. It could be a 4 or 3 point game here, just like the divisional game. It's a tough pick here. This game is 50-50. I'm not sure who wins this game here because I like the way the Buccaneers played last week. They destroyed Washington, and the Lions really struggled. The Lions really struggled against the Rams. And especially now when you got Baker Mayfield feeling dangerous, as he likes to say it, you got to wonder if that Lions defense is truly ready for this. Because I praised them a lot during the draft when they drafted defense, but now I'm not so sure the way they played after the game against the Rams. Now I got to wonder if this defense has some holes that maybe Baker Mayfield may exploit. I'm still going to pick the Lions here. I just think the Lions are slightly better in terms of their offense. But defense-wise, they're about evenly matched with the Bucs. And it's going to be a tight ball game for sure. It's going to be a very tight ball game. But I'm going to go with the Lions here at -7 here. I think the Lions will beat the Bucs here. It's going to be a very close game. I don't think it'll be a 7-point. I think it'll be by 4 or 3. This game's going to be very close. I'm going to pick the Lions over the Bucs. All right, everybody, that wraps up my 4 key game picks for week number 2. Please check the description below for my picks for week number 3. For all of my week 2 picks, sorry. Next week, we'll get into week number 3. Anyways, I've been rambling on too much. This video is already long as it is. I'll see you guys all next week. Take care and enjoy your football weekend.